All right. Speaking of different,
Mm-hmm.
the flashpoint in this year's draft, the lightning rod to me is Shedeur Sanders. And I have been a big fan of his from the start against the grain because I just loved him from his first year at college. Heck, I've watched him a lot at Jackson State. I love the accuracy. I love the toughness, both mental and physical toughness, and just the feel for playing the hardest position to play in all of sports. Those add up to high first round pick. And it did my heart good also to see that the great Mel Kiper Jr. on your big board, you have Shedeur one notch ahead of Cam Ward, 5 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, eureka, voila, there it is. And yet nobody is questioning the Titans or for that matter, the Browns for not even sniffing Shedeur. To my knowledge, there's not been a peep out there about Tennessee or Cleveland having even the slightest interest in Shedeur. Why is that?
Because they probably don't. And I remember having conversations with my friends in the NFL, and I never got the feeling that there was this great love for Shedeur as an NFL prospect, as a quarterback. And I had the same thing. I remember when Boomer, that's why I had him third. He went in the second round. Remember, that was the year Steve Young should have been in that draft. Remember, he went to the USFL and the LA Express.
Did.
So I guess they felt like there's whatever. It seemed like Brett Favre had a high grade on Brett. He went in the second round, right? You think about Aaron Rodgers. He was considered to be the number one pick in the draft 3 weeks before that draft, went 24. But I go to really Brett Favre getting into the second round when he had a super high grade. Remember, Dan Marino dropped to the end of the first round.
He did.
Okay. So you've had this slide before. And I went back to 1970, Skip, and 6 of the 8 quarterbacks that slid based on my ratings turned out to be pretty good. Really good, okay? And 2 didn't. That was Brady Quinn and Jimmy Clausen in terms of my grades. Now, we'll see what happens with Shedeur. I have him 5 on the board. We'll see where he goes. Does he go 21 to Pittsburgh? Does somebody else trade back in if he gets past Pittsburgh? I can't tell you that. But all I do is he probably will slide a bit. I never got the feeling when I was talking to my friends in the league that they agreed with me. In fact, they didn't. They didn't. I never argued with them. I let them say what they were going to say because he doesn't have the traits. He doesn't have the explosive arm. He doesn't have the 4.6 40. He's not 6'3", 6'4", 230. Okay? And he's Shedeur Sanders. And I go back to Peyton Manning. I've said this time and time again. Don't for a minute, Skip, and I'm sure you know this, feel that everybody loves Peyton Manning when he came out. They didn't.
No.
They didn't.
Well, a lot of people love Ryan Leaf.
50% of the league that I talk to like Ryan Leaf better than Peyton. 50% like Peyton. Bill Polian.
Just real quick point, Mel. I was close in those days to the USC coaching staff. I just happened to be friends with several of them. They loved Ryan Leaf because he had come to the Coliseum and just lit them up. And their big description to me was, it's like he's a linebacker playing quarterback. Well, he wasn't emotionally ready for the onslaught of the media when he got to San Diego, obviously. But he had big ability, obviously. So go ahead.
You're right. No, everything you said is accurate. That was like I always remind people, and Brian Billick, a good friend of mine, always said, Brian said, everybody does revisionist history with quarterbacks. Everybody, if they didn't like a guy, he turns it, all of a sudden I like them. They did like him, and I had questions. So they always do the revisionist history. That's why you try to go back to real time back in the day. Peyton Manning, I was getting calls from my friends in the league after his pro day, Skip, and I bring this story up because it applies to Shedeur. They were saying if his name was Peyton Jones, it'd be a third-round pick. There was the allure of being Peyton Manning, Archie's son. They're saying the same thing about Shedeur. If his name was Shedeur Jones instead of Shedeur Sanders, it'd be a third-round pick. No. So the same. Now, Bill Polian, Hall of Fame GM, took Peyton Manning. That's not going to happen with Shedeur. He's going to fall, okay? Remember, when Brett Favre came out, there were some quarterbacks who went ahead of him, weren't very good. So the bottom line is, where does Shedeur fall? And if he does go to the right team, right organization, he has a good career, he's going to be like 6 of the 8 following quarterbacks that have done really well in the NFL. We'll see, because the most important thing they say for quarterbacks is decision-making and accuracy. Toughness. Okay? That's what he has.
Okay? So you mocked him at 9 to New Orleans. Are you still kind of hanging in with that?
No.
Okay.
I go to Adam Schefter on that.
And Adam Schefter report, I saw in his report today that a lot of NFL people are very skeptical of that happening.
When Adam says that New Orleans probably not, then I'll say, okay. And he's saying probably not. He doesn't know. So at the end of the day, you trust the ultimate source, the ultimate insider, Adam Schefter, to say,
Yeah.
no. So I don't understand it, Skip. Kellen Moore is the new coach. You're in a dome. I brought up Drew Brees. Remember Miami with the shoulder said no.
Yep.
Remember Nick
Yep.
Saban would have had the history would have been rewritten there, right?
Yep.
But he ends up in New Orleans with the dome. Now you got Atlanta dome. You got the Carolina, Tampa Bay. You got everything going for Shedeur. If you had questions about arm strength, Brees, questionable arm strength coming out of Purdue. Then
Absolutely.
the shoulder on top of that, right?
Yep.
And yet New Orleans took him after Miami didn't. And he wins a Super Bowl down there because it certainly helped him. It benefited him. Having Sean Payton certainly did as well. But I looked at the size, 6'1", 215. Drew Brees, right? Early first pick in the second round, right? Think about where Shedeur, 6'1.5", 212. 4'8", I think it was 4'8", 40 for Drew Brees. What was Shedeur to be? Probably somewhere in there, right?
In that ballpark.
In that ballpark. So very, very, very similar to Drew Brees. Elements of different quarterbacks, but all elements of guys who were successful. So to answer your thing, if Shedeur Sanders is not a successful quarterback, I will be surprised. I think he'll be really good. I'll say the same thing. He has to be protected. He's got to get about a tick faster. We said the same thing about Tom Brady.
No doubt.
Tom Brady had to be protected. That's what you think about it. Tom Brady was a late 6th round pick because he ran a 5'2", 440, had a 24 vertical, and didn't have the great arm. And that's why Giovanni Carmazzi from Hofstra, who was athletic, fast, and had a powerful arm from Hofstra, went in the 3rd round, and Tom Brady went as a compensatory pick at the end of the 6th round. It was the same thing back then as is now. Traits win out. They ultimately win out because guess what? You have to justify, Skip, what happened. And if Shedeur Sanders goes number 1 or number 2 or number 3, you didn't know. He didn't have a great arm. He was 6'1.5", 212. He didn't run a 40. He's probably a 4'9", 40 guy, whatever he is. You knew all that. How'd you take it? He didn't fit the criteria of a number 1, number 2, number 3 pick overall. So you got to have a rocket arm, you got to run fast, and you got to be athletic and all that. And that's why I respect Bill Polian, and he's a Hall of Famer because he took Peyton Manning, who didn't have the howitzer for an arm, didn't have the great legs. He was 6'5". Now, Shedeur was only 6'1.5", but what do they say now about Peyton? Threw the most accurate wobbly ball in NFL history, right? After his pro day, they were saying, all wobbly balls and balls that were bouncing.
True. Okay. So are you pretty sure Shedeur is not going 3 to the Giants?
Everybody seems to say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's correct and Adam's correct about New Orleans, then you brought up the Steelers. They're down at 21. Is it possible Shedeur falls in their laps at 21? And then the next question would be, would they take him at 21?
Here's a couple of things to unpack on all this, Skip, is if I'm picking in the NFL draft at that point, I'm not telling anybody what I'm thinking about or doing. This is the most important position in all sports as quarterback in the NFL, right? I wouldn't let anybody know anything I'm thinking in that building about liking Shedeur, not liking Shedeur, hoping he drops, trading back, passing on him, whatever. I'm not saying a thing. So if you are, shame on you, okay? You shouldn't let anybody know anything you're doing. Because guess what? If they think you're taking them and you're not, they might try to trade up, might affect the teams. So you can play the game. Why would you play it any other way? Why would you let that information out of your building? So I don't know what Pittsburgh's going to do. I hope that nobody knows what Pittsburgh's going to do except Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, right? Well, if he's there, I don't think they've planned on it back in the 3 months ago or 2 months ago or maybe a couple weeks ago. Now they're seeing a possibility. They got to look at him. But then you get to, with the arm, I said the dome. I'm amazed New Orleans isn't interested if they aren't. Now, maybe they're not saying exactly what they're thinking.
Not saying.
Maybe they're not. So I think that's the perfect fit is New Orleans, Skip.
Okay.
Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati. What happens? Wind, weather. I'm here in Baltimore. Look at the weather. Okay, in those months, you got to deal with that. You got to cut through wind, deal with weather. Shedeur doesn't have that arm that some of the other quarterbacks that have come out have, obviously, and neither did Drew Brees, right? Peyton Manning, where'd he play, Skip? Dome. All right, the quarterback that went to the right spot. That's why I thought Brees, Manning, dome, Shedeur, dome. New Orleans needs a quarterback. Kellen Moore's a new coach. You want to handpick your quarterback. What could be? I haven't picked a quarterback in the first round in 54 years since 1971. Why not Shedeur? We'll see. They're ninth. I'm picking ninth, Skip. I'm not letting anybody know what I'm thinking. No. So, hey, more power to Adam and all the others. If they know, great. But if I'm an organization and I found out accurate stuff is coming out of my building, I'm going to find out who leaked it, and they're fired.
Okay, I got it.
Because you cannot let that out of your building. You just can't.
I'm with you. I do know for a fact that Shedeur's daddy would love to see him be a Saint, that he thinks that's a great fit, as do you, for all those same reasons. And Derek Carr's got a bum shoulder, but he's a good guy. He'd be a good teacher. He'd be a good bridge for one more year if Shedeur needed that. So I can tell you Dion is bullish on New Orleans, but I don't know if New Orleans is bullish on Shedeur.
We'll find out, Skip. That's the one thing I loved growing up, and I say what gravitated you, because you didn't know. It was a mystery. It really was all as long as we go into draft day not knowing what's better than that, and then you can have your questioning of an organization or praising of an organization, see how they maneuver. Do the Saints, maybe they don't like him at 9? Do they like him enough to get back in? And this whole concept of, well, if you didn't like him at 3, you can't like him at 23.
It doesn't make any sense.
Skip, did you hear? I was like, well, how does that make sense when the Ravens took Hayden Hurst and then traded back in to get Lamar Jackson? That's telling you that they didn't have Lamar high enough to take him.
They did not.
6 picks earlier, but they took him, and they didn't even know if they'd be able to get back in. They didn't know if somebody else would get back in before them or higher than they were. So how can you believe that if you pass on Shedeur at 2 or 3, you can't go back in and get him? You can, but the Ravens did it. That was the last pick of Hall of Fame player and GM Ozzie Newsome. Okay. After drafting Hayden Hurst, 25-year-old at the time, tight end out of South Carolina, they traded back in to take Lamar Jackson with the final pick of the first round that year. And remember, New Orleans, who hasn't taken a quarterback in the first round in 54 years, it's because when they traded up that year, I sat there on the set and said, they're trading. It's got to be Lamar Jackson.
Oh.
It was Marcus Davenport, defensive end out of Texas San Antonio. Okay, so they could have had Lamar Jackson as the heir apparent to Drew Brees, and they didn't do it. You took a defensive end, Marcus Davenport, out of Texas San Antonio. So that's why we love this process, Skip. The uncertainty, the variances of opinions, they're all over the place, polarizing players, teams that could go multiple directions. We don't know what's going to happen. Team needs to go 3-4 deep. It's going to be a fun 3 days, Skip.
Okay. Speaking of Deion Sanders, had him on this show. And he made a strong case to me that he would like to see Travis Hunter used in pro football just the way Deion used him in college football. And his point was, let him play 70% of the snaps on defense and 70% on offense, because the NFL offenses move a little slower than the college fast break offenses do, that he'll be just fine playing both ways at about a 70% level in pro football. Do you agree?
I believe this guy. I think if he goes to Cleveland, that's where everybody thinks he's going. He's offense because they need juice, they need excitement, they need playmakers, they need touchdown makers, right? So you go to Cleveland, you're offense. Then you say at corner, they have some young corners that are pretty good. So that corner, all of a sudden now, you need the end of that half. Teams are going to get the ball to start the second half. They're going to get to double it up. You need to stop him. He's got to be on the field. Late in the game, all these games come down to the final 2 drives. They really do. You're sitting there at 3:30 in Eastern time on a Sunday afternoon. These 1 o'clock games are coming down. You don't even know at 3:30 what's happening. I have a lot of friends. I can't bet the fourth, right? So I know what happened at 1, and these games are still unknown. You got to wait to even bet the daggone games, right? Because everybody's gambling now, right? Everybody's betting, so they got to wait because NFL games don't end until aren't over till they're over at the end of the fourth quarter and that last drive. Well, who's going to stop that team coming down the field, Skip? You got to have, Deion said it perfectly. He said, you're going to have Travis Hunter standing on the sidelines next to the coach when those cornerbacks are getting beaten, that opposing quarterback's driving that team down for a game-winning field goal or a game-winning touchdown. You can't. So what I'm saying, you got to strategically pick your spots to have Travis Hunter on defense. Strategically pick your spots and having exclusively on offense, doing his job, but pick your spots on defense when you have to have him out there to make a play. And if you work it that way, hey, first of all, you're not keeping Travis Hunter off the field. You're not going to do it. So you're not keeping him. He'll be on that field. He's not going to put up with that. So again, can he hold up physically? Hopefully he can. There's a unique freak at safety. I'll call him the unique freak. It's Nick Emanwari, safety out of South Carolina. And then what Travis is, it's just unique to the game because we have never, since I've been doing this, had a player that's going to actually go out and play a ton of snaps on both sides of the ball.